Hello, we should be live right now. Welcome to this blockchain presentation. It's a new topic for the Finland Azure user group, and this is very exciting, at least on my part. I should probably mute myself somewhere still, because it's coming out. There we go. So, Finland Azure user group, as you probably know, is the largest Azure user group in Finland. And we are sporting over 1.8k members at the moment. And we have been organizing these tips and tricks sessions every 3 weeks roughly this year, and they should be continuing through the year. If you want to speak in these events, please contact me or anybody else in the organizational team in Finland Azure user group through Slack or LinkedIn or whatever, and we'll get you a spot to speak. And today we have Lauri Peltonen from Azure, who's our resident blockchain expert, and he will be talking about blockchain possibilities in Azure. So Lauri, please take it away.
Thank you, Pasi. And well, let's just go. If we start with some introduction, as Pasi mentioned, Lauri Peltonen, you can find me in LinkedIn and but lots of various other places. And if you have any questions, you can just ask me anywhere, and especially anything about blockchain. I'm very happy to talk about that topic. And I have basically kind of two jobs in my day job. I do Azure development, so I kind of like the traditional stuff, and then as my night job, I do some blockchain development. I've been doing that for some 3 years now. I started 2017. I started trading some cryptocurrencies, and then I figured out that I'm very bad in it, and then I had to find something else around there. So I found this blockchain development, and I've been doing it kind of on off ever since, and it's fun. And for me, the FAUG, I haven't been here before, so I really have no idea what kind of presentations you people usually have here. But at least this is my presentation. So let's see. And about the theme that we have around here, this beautiful change around the slides, I have to mention that I was thinking that it would be nice to have some like blockchain themed slides. And then I'm like, okay, let's put some change around it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And then I'm like after a few days, I was looking into it again. I'm like, no, it doesn't look like blockchain, but something else. But then it was kind of like, yeah, but it's already there and it's beautiful. So let's keep it like that. Let's think it reminds me of blockchain. So what we will look at today, basically we will look into blockchains and this wonderful thing called Azure, kind of what kind of blockchain things Azure has to offer. There's lots of technical stuff, technical details in the blockchains, which we could be going through, but we will not look into that because that's basically a huge rabbit hole, and we will just sink into there and we would just lose interest. So we have a very quick overall look at what kind of types of blockchain there are and what kind of use there can be, but not into the technical details so much. And at the end, we will have some time reserved for possible questions, and you can just shoot them in the YouTube chat. So before we go any further, before we look into what Azure has to offer, we have to kind of realize that not all blockchains are the same. There are different kinds of blockchains. Like you have different cloud services and different whatever services. So there are different kind of blockchains which are meant for different use. So let's have a look at those first, so we a bit understand what kind of offers there are. So let's start with private blockchains, which are probably the easiest to understand. And you can think of them like your private sandboxes or playgrounds where you go to play, and you can basically do whatever you want there. You can decide who gets to play there, who you invite there, what kind of rules there are. And then you just like, okay, this is my sandbox, and maybe someone wants to come and play with me here, but I don't know if anyone wants me, or if anyone likes me, if anyone wants to come here. So you decide everything basically there. The blockchain part is the only kind of static resource there, that it has the blockchain capabilities, but all the rules around it, like who joins and what can be done, that can be decided by you. And then the other end is public blockchains. You have basically nobody's in charge of these, and you have probably heard the word Bitcoin and maybe even Ethereum. These are public blockchains, and where everyone can join, everyone can leave, everyone can send transactions, and nobody can restrict your access. So that's kind of from the other end of the blockchain types. And this is a bit of a wild area and kind of like unregulated, and nobody kind of knows what to do with this. Like all the different countries are like wondering what kind of law should be established for public blockchains, because nobody can censor it, and they cannot restrict them in any sense. So it's a bit still open, how should we treat them. And then in the between, there's different variants. And now if you don't get too much shock, we have this beautiful spectrum of the blockchains. I like to think of the different blockchain types as a spectrum. So at the one end, there's the private blockchains, and in the other end, there's the public types. But in between, there's like loads and loads of different types. Like there's at least hybrid and consortium blockchains, and they have kind of properties from the both ends. So they have some properties from the private side and some properties from the public side. So it's not so black and white here. But if we go more into the Azure side, then you probably somewhat speak Azure already, but you might not be so fluent with blockchains. So let's try to combine these, and let's try to see what kind of possibilities there are. So, okay, let's just go forward. So if we start from Azure Marketplace, what blockchain offers they have? If we just start there and click the blockchain, they have almost 200 options there, which sounds a lot. But if you kind of a bit know what you're looking for and know a bit what they are, then in the end, there's not too much useful stuff. There's lots of like specific stuff, but if you want to do something a bit more general, then you don't have so many options actually. So let's start with an obvious start. If we have a look at the publisher called Microsoft, they have 4 options, which is not a lot. And half of the options are deprecating and going away. So basically, they only have 2 things that they are offering here, which are worthwhile. There's Hyperledger and there's Azure Blockchain Workbench. So let's have a quick look at what those 2 are. The other 2 deprecating options, the Ethereum Azure, that's a node for the Ethereum public blockchain. I'm not sure why they are deprecating it, but I'm going to talk about that a bit later, a little bit. And then the IPFS, it's basically kind of like a decentralized file system. I also don't know why they want to deprecate it. So basically, there's only two products left. And if we start with the Hyperledger Fabric, it's private blockchain, and it's built by the Hyperledger project, which has all sort of open source stuff and lots of tooling around the blockchains and what you can do with them and how you can use them. And the whole Hyperledger project is backed and kind of started by lots of finance and IT companies which have very big usage elsewhere. That's like JP Morgan, IBM, Intel, Cisco, so on, so on. So there's lots of big names behind Hyperledger. Not all of them are actually actively probably using the blockchain so much, but they are at least backing it and they are giving support to it. So they will probably use it if they don't use it for anything big currently. And more. And as I mentioned, this is widely used for some private blockchains. If you want to create something between, for example, between banks or other institutions, or if you want to make some integrations from older systems, for example, into a blockchain world, you can use these kind of tools from the Hyperledger toolkit. And I started one of those in my own subscription, and it was actually very cheap. There came I think was it even VMs or something, maybe like 2 cheap virtual machines and a few monitor systems, and that was basically it. And then some configuration. So what it does, it basically gives you this kind of environment where you can have a very, very basic blockchain to play around with. It's a good start if you want to try something. And the second option, the Azure Blockchain Workbench, it is a tiny bit more complicated. As we can see in the picture, there's lots of stuff around it. So if we have a look at the upper right corner, there's basically the blockchain is there. It's an Ethereum-based blockchain. And everything around is different, like monitoring and data storage and how we can input and output data from the blockchain. So you have whatever IoT devices and whatnot you have here. So this is a bit similar than the previous Hyperledger, but it has lots more capabilities about how you want to interact with the blockchain. So it's basically a jungle of services. And it's also mostly for private blockchains. And yeah, as I said, it basically provides you with all the different ways how to interact with your blockchain. But it's a good start if you wanna try blockchains. It's a bit more expensive, but because it has so good connectivity, it's very much much easier to start with it than the Hyperledger, I would say. So this is also basically you click there, you choose a few options and launch, and that's it. It creates your resource group with some 20 different resources. And if you take the minimum options, it's about 200 euros per month. And then if you go into the resource group and you know a bit what you're doing, you just go to some app services that you have there. You see, okay, this is not the minimum, so let's just cut it in half, and it becomes much more cheaper. And what is missing here is an explorer. So if we talk a bit about what is the blockchain explorer, basically when you have the blockchain and when you have data inside it, it might be maybe difficult to know what there is, and you have to read the data in some way. So explorers are basically a way to read the data from the blockchain. As we saw in the picture earlier, there are lots of integrations in the blockchain workbench, so this is not such a big problem. But still, if you are used to more public blockchains where the explorers are a big thing, then you might want to install some of the available blockchain explorers there. So if you wanna do some MVPs, wanna try out some things, this is a very valid starting point. And then what kind of other stuff there is in Azure? Well, there's lots of weird stuff, like the 200 entries that they had. I have most of it. I had no idea what it is. I had never heard of it, and I've been doing this for quite long now. They are basically some sort of specialized blockchains or specialized tools for a specialized blockchain. So most people will never have any use for those. And I would imagine that neither would you. And then some of it is access points to even some public blockchains or maybe some private blockchains also. And then at least they used to have this kind of section for consultations with the blockchain. And I was going through them and I was like, what kind of consultations are there? They have somewhere for free and some cost some serious money. And I actually tried some of them. Like I clicked like one of the free ones, like it was some starters to how to start your own blockchain. And then I filled in my information and nobody ever got back to me. And nowadays, I think they have even removed the section. So I don't know if they even have any consultations anymore. Anyway, they seem to be rather useless. And what other stuff? Well, they have something. They have also something for the public blockchains, but not too much. You can run some nodes, which are basically access points for blockchains. So if you want to access a public blockchain, you can get a node for it, and you can run it in Azure, and you can see what the blockchain has, and you can interact with it. But it's not very exhaustive list, so it only has very specific options there. And in general, the concept of kind of using Azure, which is centralized, and that's kind of like the beauty of it. And if you want to use it for kind of decentralized public blockchain, it's like not my first option. Let's put it this way. It's good, very good that they have some stuff. It's very good that it's easy to start from there. You can point and click and have some nodes to interact with some blockchains, but it would not be my first option. So I would suggest you to start with private blockchains, what the Azure has to offer, and look into those at least first. And in general, yeah, sure, you can just go ahead, see what there is in Azure. But as I said, I wouldn't consider it as an alternative for any access to the public blockchains. And the tricky part is if you want to use a private blockchain, if somebody else is using a private blockchain and they want to invite you, it might not be possible for you to find a node from Azure which would connect to the private blockchain. So in any case, you maybe simply have to go somewhere, search in some GitHub for the right client to connect to the right blockchain. So it might just simply not be worth it to search the Azure functionalities. But of course, you can try. So for fun, just go ahead, see what there is. It's not expensive. It's not complicated to set up. It might be fun to see what there is. But then for business use, the question is like, how would you start real business use for blockchains? That's actually a very tricky question. We have been thinking about that in Azure for quite a while now, because I have been trying to ask, how could we get blockchain projects? And nobody actually knows how. It seems like often these are some existing institutions which want to kind of investigate, like maybe there might be something that blockchain offers that we could use. For example, they use private blockchains quite much. They don't have big things around them yet, but they are building around them right now, even in Finland. Quite good things going around, but nothing very public yet. So what you basically first would have to do is do some kind of research, like, do you really need the blockchain for a project? And this is a picture which is quite somewhat famous around Google. If you go Google, like, do I need a blockchain? And you get answers saying, no, you don't. And this is, well, it's a joke, but it's also quite true in many cases. So there are not so many cases when you would want to use especially a private blockchain. So what you would first need to, you have to first decide what kind of blockchain you need. If you need a blockchain, if you have managed to decide that you need a blockchain, then you have to decide what type of blockchain do you need. Do you need to use a private blockchain, or can you use a public choice blockchain? And then you can, of course, figure out, like, does Azure support some of the stuff you want to have? So if you know that I want this kind of blockchain, and you know even which blockchain product, like, then you have to look into Azure and see that, okay, do they even have what I need? Or do I just have to download to my own computer or run in a virtual machine and see what there is and try it that way? So I would say the answer is perhaps, but it really depends on your needs and on the needs of the client. Then really, how can you decide? Some things to consider when you want to, well, before you start considering a blockchain project. Do you need to restrict the amount or the kind of participants? For example, if you're a bank, there are quite strict restrictions about who can see different transactions and what kind of data you can publish. And then quite many projects where I have been, blockchain projects where I have been involved in, they have been basically screwed because they wanted to put some personal information in the blockchain, and then GDPR comes and says that no, you cannot put anything personal there because you cannot take it out. So you have to consider the participants and what kind of needs you have for them. And then the second thing you have to consider is about the performance. The different blockchain types have very, very different performances. So if you look at private blockchains, they are actually very performant because you can think of them like private or distributed databases almost. They have some other stuff also, but at their simplest, they can be thought of as a kind of state machines or distributed databases. So they are very performant, but the more you kind of go towards the public blockchains where anyone can join and anyone can publish transactions and so on, then they get their throughput gets a lot less. So they are not performant anymore, and they cannot be thought as a performance system. So that's not even a measurement anymore. So it's not for something like real-time chat or something like that. So they are more like state machines, which cost money. And if we talk about money, then the different blockchains also, it depends very much on the type, how you want to or how you have to pay for the transactions. So whatever data you want to include in the blockchain, you have to send a transaction which includes the data. And the transaction cost to send the transaction, they vary a lot. In private blockchains, it's basically for free. And in public blockchains, currently it costs maybe something like $5 to send a very simple transaction. So as you can see, it's especially the public blockchains are really not for this kind of traditional data needs. So it has to be quite specific about what you can use them for and what you shouldn't use them for. But you have to go through all of these kind of things and figure out if you really want to use blockchain. So probably how this process ends for you at least the first stage is that you decide, okay, let's at least start with private blockchain. And this is probably the best start for most developers and most companies because it's the most familiar environment. As I mentioned, it's kind of like a distributed database which has some extra functionality. For example, the data is immutable. So once you input something, you cannot take it out anymore. And often the data is transparent, so anyone can read all the data. But in private blockchains, it kind of depends on your settings also. But if you want to use something kind of ready-made and which is already running, and you want to use public, where everyone can see things and everyone can interact with it, then usually the answer is that no, you should not bring an existing product into a public blockchain, because mostly of the performance reasons and the transaction costs and privacy reasons and all sort of stuff like that. So typically requires a really different mindset about the projects that you should put in the public blockchains. And as I said, you cannot really move existing projects there so easily. And some examples like what there are, then why would someone use public blockchains and what kind of projects there exist currently? There's because all the public blockchains have their own native cryptocurrency. For example, in the Bitcoin network, it's the native cryptocurrency is called Bitcoin. And in Ethereum, they have their own native cryptocurrency, but there's also a possibility to create kind of like sub assets inside the blockchain, and anyone can create those. And then some of them start to even get value if someone wants to buy them. So there comes these kind of cryptocurrency exchanges. The easiest are centralized, but then in public blockchains, you can have this kind of atomic decentralized exchanges where you basically input one asset and you get another asset out. And this is totally trustless. Nobody can screw it up. You cannot. You don't have to trust anyone. If you trust the blockchain, and that's enough. You don't have to trust any third party to exchange your assets. So this is one big use case in the public part. And there are another, which is kind of coming up slowly, is this kind of autonomous entities, which are basically pieces of code running in the blockchain which nobody controls. So they do various things. They maybe if you send them $100, they maybe split it in two and send them to the two different addresses or something like that. So they are just programs running in the blockchain doing various things. And as I mentioned about the trustless part, this is one of the main things about the public blockchains. You don't have to trust any party. If you trust the blockchain, you can read all the code that there is, and then you can just input a transaction, and you see that you know what will happen, and nobody can kind of screw it up for you. So what this brings is this kind of one use case is some kind of gambling and games and all the things where typically you would need to trust some central entity which says that, okay, you won this game, or the central entity which says that, okay, now your odds are this kind of very bad to gamble on this. But in blockchain, you don't have to trust any central authority. You can just kind of read the code that there is, and you see that, okay, these are my odds if I gamble. And you can read the code that if this kind of thing happens in this blockchain game, then I win. And there's no way around it. So this was a quick overlook about the different use cases for the blockchains. And this is actually the end of my quick presentation. So now we have slot, we have time for questions, whatever wonders you have. You can just use that YouTube channel to ask whatever you want.
Yeah, while people are waiting, what are your feelings about the NFT craze that's been going on, at least in the US right now, that everything from kind of basketball videos and art is using blockchain as their backend to kind of sell a copy of it, or the original version.
Well, interesting question. I guess most of us have read about those. They are kind of non-fungible assets, which are basically like baseball cards or something, which you can trade in the blockchain in a trustless way. So there's a marketplace where you can trade these kind of assets in a trustless ways, and then there's a different services where you can even create these kind of assets. And the easiest way is that you have just some picture and maybe some text, and you just input them in some form and click send, and then the blockchain creates this kind of NFT for you. And maybe even someone wants to buy it at some point. And obviously, some people have really bought them for like millions of dollars. And well, I don't know what to think about it. I think it's very good that there's at least publicity for blockchain. That's one good part about those. But then there's loads of problems with those. Also, most people don't really understand how they work, so they just buy something which looks cool, and they don't understand what it does or how it works. And there's quite many ways to also cheat in those kind of systems. Like, yes, it's in blockchain, but not all of it is in blockchain. So the part which is in blockchain, you cannot cheat that part. But the part which is not in blockchain, for example, the image, it's usually not hosted in blockchain because all the data is so expensive there. All the data storage is very expensive, so the image is stored somewhere else. For example, in your whatever Azure blob storage, and then there's only a link. Okay, this NFT links to that picture, and you buy it with $1 million, and then someone just goes in the blob storage and changes the picture to be something else, and you're like, wait, what just happened? So there's lots of risks involved, of course. Well, it's a new thing, so of course there's risks, but there's also lots of potential. So I would be a bit careful what I buy there, at least.
When are you setting up your own NFT?
That's gonna wait a while. No thanks. I figure out I suck in the trading part, so I probably suck in that part also. So what I only do, I do the development, and someone pays me to develop it.
Yeah, that should work also.
Yeah, it works for me. I'm happy with that.
But yeah, seems like we don't have any questions at the moment. Okay, now Dale actually wrote in the chat.
Given the challenges of finding use cases and customers, can you tell a bit about what still excites you about the blockchain? Yes, what excites me about the blockchain, it's not the private blockchain so much, where it's a bit difficult to find the use case. I understand there are use cases, for example, for banks, for example, or logistics and this kind of big corporations or entities. But in the public blockchains, because the mindset has to be kind of totally different, you have to well, when you enter the world, you have to kind of start thinking in a different way, and that's what kind of excites me the most. The possibilities that it offers are really not understood. Everything is very new. There's lots of stuff coming all the time, lots of scams, of course, because people don't understand how it works, and people lose their money a lot, but also some people make a lot of money also. But I don't care about the money part so much. I'm more interested about the possibility that it offers, and the decentralized part and the trustless part. That's what I'm more interested in. And there's a continued question about my project. I have been doing maybe around 5 projects within the year or something. They really go. Some of them are basically just consultations. I help some projects with their problems, and quite many of them actually end in my sentence saying that you just cannot do this with a public blockchain, and then they're like, no, that's not the result we wanted. And then they are unhappy, and then we just part ways. But then there's some development that I do quite often. You can just, if you want to hear more about my project, you can just poke me afterwards. But basically, I do development for the public Ethereum blockchain, where the possibilities are endless in some sense. Anything else?
Seems like not. So I suppose we can wrap it up for this time. But if you want to contact Lauri on the blockchain stuff, poke him at LinkedIn at least, I suppose.
Yeah.
And any Finland Azure user group stuff, poke me any way you want. LinkedIn, Twitter, Slack. And let's get some more of these talks going. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Lauri for the great talk.
Thanks.
Yes, so see.